Hello everybody! Welcome once again to another edition of Trivia with Mike right here on Channel 955. We're located in the first floor of Water Tower. We've got our wonderful co-hosts today. We've got Bailey and Julia here today. We also have a studio audience today. We have Arlene Brackensick with us. And for those of you who have been holding out and said, you're not coming till we have refreshments, well, you missed it. Today we have schnecks, we have coffee. You could have had a wonderful, wonderful mid-morning snack. Next week, come on, we'll have snacks for you. How are you two today?
Good. Good.
I know you're regular viewers of the show, so you know how this goes, right?
Yeah.
You've never seen it, have you?
A little bit.
Okay, well I sent them a video last night, so they have a little bit of an idea of what we're doing. But we begin by chatting with the two of you.
Okay.
I thought of the two of you as co-hosting because Nicole Klaas, suggested that you would be wonderful at this. Now Nicole is our social worker up in the medical care center up in Bradford. What does that mean when she says the two of you work with her? What is it that the two of you do up there?
A little bit of everything.
Pretty much. Yep. We're
Fill
trying to
in-
catch all
fill
for
in all the
nursing and
holes.
social services.
Phil, you know, I'll tell you though, I mean, as you can guess by my age, I'm an orphan. Both my parents are deceased now. But they both went through extended medical issues before they passed. And I think a lot of people believe that social workers are involved in counseling, they're involved in maybe issues related to AODA or something like that. But in a healthcare setting, that's not necessarily what a social worker is, right? In my parents' case, they were in essence making sure that services were in place to provide for the full care for my parents. That's what the two of you do, correct?
Pretty much, yep.
And it could be on-site or it could be off-site
This is what
when
we
they
do.
discharge?
Mhm.
Okay. Bailey, I know you are one of our scholarship recipients this year from the Treasure Chest.
Yes.
So this semester in particular, you're a student and you're working here in the social work department.
Yes.
How's your schooling going?
Good. Busy.
Okay.
Not home a lot of the times. I'm either here or doing homework or pretty much at home to sleep.
At home to sleep. And do you live close to campus or do you live at home?
Oh, I rent a house on Summit Avenue, so just literally a few blocks away from here.
Okay.
So not a far commute.
So you rent a house. You're independently wealthy? No.
You can. I have a couple of roommates. But
Oh,
you
a
can stay.
couple of roommates. Okay. But you're studying every night, no partying or anything like that, right?
No.
Okay. This is your senior year, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are you going to stay at East Castle after you graduate?
I'm gonna do my master's degree at UWM as well.
Okay.
Hopefully, I have a meeting shortly on that,
Okay.
and then I plan to stay through that
That is
for a
fabulous.
few more years.
That is fabulous. We like in particular our scholarship recipients to stay. That is just wonderful. Julia, I see you sitting at the desk upstairs on the 4th floor all the time, feverishly working. What is it that you're doing behind that desk when people get off the elevator? You're the first person that they see.
All kinds of things, Mike. Anything from nursing and medication orders to social service stuff, like you said, setting up ancillary services in-house and outside, getting discharges ready, getting admissions ready.
Okay. On a personal note, I love the spelling of your first name. Is there a family connection to that? Rather than just, the easier way of spelling it? How does that come about?
Yep, my family's of Hispanic descent, so my pronunciation of my name is Julia.
Julia.
And my parents thought that if they spelled it this way, it would be pronounced that way, which is not the case, of course, but.
So I apologize for pronouncing it incorrectly all this time. Julia, it's a beautiful name.
Thank you.
And of course the spelling is very, very unique. So, well, the two of you, why don't we take a look at some of the trivia questions, shall we? We've got about a half an hour. I know Arlene is all geared up and ready to go as well. We're going to hopefully have you folks come up with the answers. But if you've ever seen the show, you know that I have great difficulty with timing. So I have to have a watch that I can have in plain view of myself so that I know when we're supposed to end, okay? But if you've ever seen the show before, you know that we begin with a new tradition here on Trivia, and we give the birthdays of the month. Hopefully all of you will see your name up here at some point in time. I won't forget to put you up there. But Helen Houston on October 17th, and she has a birthday twin, Denny Stratty, also on the 17th. Denny, I think, is going to be spending her birthday in Door County. What a great way to celebrate your birthday, especially at peak Colorama. My wife actually leaves for Door County today at 11 o'clock. I'm a bachelor until Sunday at about 4 o'clock. So, you know, if I make it into work on Monday, and we're just going to turn this off because you folks right now are much more important than phone calls coming in on my cell phone. So if I look well and healthy on Monday, you know I survived a weekend away with my wife. Helen Goucher on October 18th, and again, a birthday twin, Lee Fitzsimmons. And on the 28th, Rudy Sundberg and David Woodard. So happy birthday to all of the birthday people out there for the month of October. If you happen to see them in the corridors as you're walking along, be sure to wish them a happy birthday from yourself and from all of us here at Trivia. All right, let's start the show, shall we? We're going to begin by taking a look at the Peshtigo Fire, October 8th, 1871. Do any of you know where Peshtigo is?
Somewhere north?
Yes,
Wisconsin.
Northern Wisconsin, absolutely. It's actually not far from Crivets. This fire took place in 1871. When I was much younger, my sister and brother-in-law owned a cabin in the Crivets area, and we would go up there deer hunting and things like that. And I saw the area of the fire. You can still see the scarring of the fire to this day. It was just amazing. If you take a look, that's about where the fire started. Kind of a flashpoint, driven by the fact that we were in the midst of a severe drought at that time. There happened to be a storm that came up that had heavy winds. A spark started a fire. The heavy winds spread it. It eventually incorporated at least half of Door County and much of the remainder of northeastern Wisconsin. Just a devastating fire. It actually caused in excess of $5 million damage. And think of 1871, $5 million. I mean, you're probably talking 40 or $50 million damage today. And for a rural area where so very few people lived, that was a catastrophic loss. We lost 1.2 million acres, basically of northern Wisconsin woodland. You know, the logging industry was about all that was up there at that time. And it destroyed 1.2 million acres of that. There were also between 1,500 and 2,500 deaths. As you can imagine, in northern Wisconsin, when a fire starts in 1871, the only source of safety is to get to the nearest river, you know, and either cross the river, or if it's on both sides of the river, stay in the middle, you know, and hope that you avoid it. But it raged for days, and it was just a horrendous thing. And again, as I said, in my younger days, I would deer hunt in that area, and you can still see the remnants of it. You see the fully grown trees now, but you see the undergrowth that really hasn't even to this day come back. There were other great fires, coincidentally, that occurred on October 8th, 1871. There was the Great Michigan Fire. There was the Great Huron Fire. Just a coincidence of history. But in addition to that, there was another great fire that occurred on October 8th, 1871, that all of you are probably familiar with. What other great fire occurred on October 8th, 1871? Arlene, do you have an idea?
Chicago.
Yes, the Great Chicago Fire. A fluke of history. All these major fires occurred on the same day. Ironically, however, it's the Great Chicago Fire that's remembered to this day for the devastating losses that the city of Chicago incurred However, devastating as it was, compared to the Peshtigo fire, only 300 people lost their life. You remember the Great Peshtigo fire was 1,500 to 2,500. Only 3.3 square miles were destroyed, in contrast to 1.5 million acres. 17,000 structures were destroyed and 100,000 were left homeless. That, of course, is exponential compared to Peshtigo, because no one was living up in Peshtigo at that time. $222 million in damage. You're really talking billions in 2022 dollars. It was the Great Chicago Fire. And there you have it. Coincidence of fate. The Peshtigo fire, which was potentially much bigger, is completely forgotten to history because of the Chicago fire. What a lot of people don't know is that Chicago actually was much smaller than Milwaukee at that time. Chicago rebuilt itself and became a major hub. Do you have any idea why Chicago started growing much faster than Milwaukee? Any idea?
Railroads?
Yes, railroads. Railroads. Both cities had major ports. Both cities stretched into the heartland because of major rivers that came to the ports. But Chicago had the railroads also. Chicago is much further south than Milwaukee. Railroads got to Chicago easier. It became a hub of merchandise and mercantile and things like that. That's what happened. We're going to move on. Income taxes. I know everybody's favorite topic, right? Income taxes. There actually are a multitude of reasons for income taxes, but basically it's a compulsory financial charge or some other type of levy. Levy, of course, is a tax. It pays for public services. In some cases, it actually pays for a redistribution of wealth as well. The inception of the modern income tax is typically accepted as 1799. Great Britain, United Kingdom, is where this concept really started. A lot of it was because of the colonial expansion of Great Britain at that time. The government had trouble paying for this expansion and navigating the globe. You know the old saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Well, that's because the British Empire had colonies on virtually every continent, and it's very costly to maintain something like that. Income tax was the way that they went about doing it. Pitt's income tax was levied from 1799 to 1802. It was abolished by Henry Addington during the Peace of Amiens, which was a war that ended. Therefore, they didn't need so much money, so they ended the income tax at that time. Income tax, however, has taken on many strange forms over the years. There was, in fact, an income tax levied in England from 1696 to 1851, which was very unique in what they levied. It wasn't necessarily income, it was a sign of wealth. And the British government levied a tax based on that sign of wealth. What was this very unique income tax?
Weight?
Arlene is shaking her head. No guess?
Weight? Size?
Like the body mass of individuals? That's a really good guess. Because it was bold and innovative, but that was not it. Bailey, any idea?
Stamps.
You know, that really is a good guess as well, because at that time, the government was starting to provide postal services, and they levied a fee if you took advantage of that. But that's not necessarily considered a tax, because that's a fee for service. So it wasn't that. It was somewhat of a nuanced issue. It was a window tax.
Wow.
What the government of England did is they would look at people's residences. They would count the windows in the residences, And what they would do then is levy an income tax based on the number of windows in your residences. As we said, that was repealed in the mid-1800s, and more progressive ways of taxing became well known. Primarily because low-income people didn't live in houses that had windows. So this window tax completely bypassed the largest sector of the population. In addition to that, the more wealthy individuals who had lots of windows started boarding up their windows or bricking up their windows. You can go through London today and find buildings that go back 200 and 300 years that have many of their windows boarded up. The reason for that was to avoid the income tax. And of course, with low-income people, no windows were in the buildings because they weren't avoiding the tax.
Couldn't afford it.
That's true. It kept heat in. Without windows, you kept heat in, and they couldn't afford, all the extra money it would cost to heat their properties without windows in them. So there you have it. A window tax is the answer to question number 2. Question number 3, we're going to take a look at a great Roman poet by the name of Horace. His formal name was Quintus Horatius Flaccus. 1265 BC to 1127 8 BC. So he lived 57 years. He in fact did live in Rome, where he was born and raised in Rome, but he spent much of his time in Athens. He was a poet, and he studied under the Greek poets of that day. He was classically trained in Athens. He was a leading lyric poet during his time. He crafted elegant hexameter verses, which were known at the time as satyrs and epistles. Acoustic iambic poetry also was another one of his venues for writing poetry. The hexameters, based on his efforts, were amusing, yet they were serious works, friendly in tone, leading the ancient satirist Perseus to comment, as his friend laughs, Horace slyly puts his finger on his every fault. Once let in, he plays about the heartstrings. Kind of a satirist, precursor to the little cartoons that we see today for politics. One of his very famous sayings, Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. Now, I know that Arlene had Latin in high school. You probably could have translated that, right?
Oh, of course. I remembered it totally.
Many people don't know this, but there was an incarnation of this program earlier where I would just ask questions of that audience. And I asked Arlene one time, working at the treasure chest, if she knew the answer. And I pointed out several people, and I indicated that there was something very cynical about them. And she said, cynical. That must mean that they were all left-handed, from the Latin sinistra. And it was absolutely right. She's the only one who got it. Dulce est decorum est pro patria mori it is sweet and proper to die for one's country. Still a recruiting slogan to this day. However, another wonderful saying of Horace's, the greatest lesson in life is to learn what? And I'll give you a clue. This famous saying is mistakenly attributed to Winston Churchill, but it was actually stated by Horace. The greatest lesson in life is to learn. Any guess?
Humility?
Humility is a wonderful guess, but it's incorrect. Any guess?
I do not have a guess.
Any guess?
My 9th grade history is failing on me.
Well, you should have taken 9th grade poetry. That's where you would have learned this.
Well, I was thinking Winston Churchill.
Oh!
With me.
My goodness, someone really wants to reach me.
But no.
You guys are much more important. We're going to stick with the show. The greatest lesson in life is to learn that even fools are right sometimes. Famous saying of Horace, mistakenly attributed to Winston Churchill, who also used this saying quite frequently. Wonderful public speaker, and there you have it. But as long as we are on the topic of Rome, we're going to take a look at Nero, Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, 1215-37 to 6968 AD. He actually ruled as Caesar from AD 54 to AD 68. He ruled during the era of the Great Fire of Rome. We talked a little bit about the Great Fire of Chicago. Now we're going to take a look at the Great Fire of Rome. July 18th and July 19th, 64 AD. His career actually also coincided with Rome's momentous change from a republic to an empire. Most people think of Nero because of the fire, but given what ended up happening, lots of things happened during his era that were just monumental. His true contributions to Rome's governments focused on diplomacy, trade, culture. However, he also was guilty of matricide, killed his own mother, killed his stepbrother. Holding and maintaining power typically meant disposing of the people who were challenging you for the power, and that's what he ended up doing. The great story of Nero is that as Rome burned, he played his fiddle. How do we know for a fact that there is no truth to this? How do we know that Nero did not play his fiddle while Rome burned? Have you ever heard the story that he played his fiddle while Rome burned? Okay.
I heard of him, but I didn't hear about him playing a fiddle.
There's also a story that he probably started the fire, because where portions of Rome were destroyed, he built a new palace. There really is probably no truth to that at all. And the story of him playing a fiddle was to highlight the fact that he was a very uncaring individual, but we know that it was not true. Any guess as to why we know it's not true?
I don't think it had been invented yet, had it?
The fiddle first emerged in the 10th century. Very good. Likely deriving from the Byzantine lyre. The first, that says fist, but the first reference to lyre was in the 9th century by the Persian biographer Qtwm. Quradabi. We're going to go with that. We're going to go with Quradabi. It is impossible to play a fiddle if it has not yet been invented. That's the answer to question number 4. We're going to take a look at contemporary history. Now, we're going to take a look at the 35th President of the United States. John F. Kennedy, May 29th, 1917 to that fateful day, November 22nd, 1963. 35th President of the United States. We've all seen the video of the assassination taking place in Dallas. Horrific thing. He also, however, was a World War II veteran. In the Navy, achieved the rank of JG, junior grade Lieutenant JG. He commanded his own boat. He commanded the PT-109. The PT-109 in a concentrated naval assault in the Pacific actually was hit. It was rammed by a Japanese destroyer, and it was sunk on August 2nd, 1943. We've all heard the story. 2 or 3 men died in the collision, but Kennedy got the remaining 7 or 8 to an island swimming. That was about 6 miles away. He actually towed one all the way who had injured his back. After being on the island for 3 or 4 days, he realized there was no water, no food, no water. Kennedy swam 5 miles again to another island, wrote a message on a coconut, gave it to natives who didn't speak English. The natives took it to an American outpost, and Kennedy and his men were rescued. However, back to PT-109, a destroyer that actually rammed the PT-109 was commanded by Lieutenant Commander Kohei Hanami. Lieutenant Commander Kohei Hanami. Lieutenant Commander Kohei Hanami actually survived the war. And coincidentally, he and JFK ran into each other later in life. What event brought JFK and Lieutenant Kohei Commander back together again? Any guesses? I'll give you a clue. It was 18 years after the fateful collision, which took place in 1943. The reunion was 18 years later. In fact, it was January 20th, 1961. January 20th. Nothing? He was a special guest of JFK at his own inauguration. There you have it. So he stood in the visitor section during the inauguration, and as the parade went past, Kennedy was able to wave to him. I'm not saying they became good friends after the fact, but it really was a good marketing technique, to show that the war was over, we were friends again, and there you have it. Our sixth and final question today, we're going to take a look at The Wizard of Oz. 1939, the great MGM film adapted from L. Frank Baum's 1900 book by the same name, a similar name, not quite The Wizard of Oz, but very, very close. The great movie starring Judy Garland, Frank Morgan, Ray Bolger, Burt Lahr, Jack Haley, Billy Burke, Margaret Hamilton, and all the Munchkins as themselves. When this first came out in 1939, it was very, very well received. I talked about the fact at a State of the Castle meeting several weeks ago. This actually premiered in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. Hollywood wanted to see, in the midst of the Depression, what a fantasy film would do in the heartland. So they debuted it in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. What really ended up putting this movie on the map, though, was that in 1956 it debuted on CBS. And it became an annual broadcast from then on. It used to only be shown at Easter time. At Christmas, there's all those holiday movies that come out. Well, this used to be an Easter show that would come on, along with the Ten Commandments and all those movies. Now, of course, you can find The Wizard of Oz at just about any time of the year. And of course, with cable, all you have to do is a search, and you can watch it anytime. During the filming of The Wizard of Oz, there was a 2-month delay in filming because of an accident to Margaret Hamilton. Margaret Hamilton was the Wicked Witch of the West. West? Wicked Witch of the West or Wicked Witch of the East?
West.
Wicked Witch of the West. There you go. If you remember, there is a time in the forest where she apparently comes up through the ground, and she's taunting Dorothy and all of her friends. She was actually burnt in that. 3rd-degree burns. Filming was delayed for about 2 months as a result of that. That, however, was not the only delay in filming because of injuries to actors as a result of The Wizard of Oz. There also was a health issue involving the cast, which altered the way we think of The Wizard of Oz to this day. And what was that?
The Tin Man's lead paint.
There you have it, the Tin Man's lead paint. Buddy Epson was hired to play the Tin Man, but he had an allergic reaction to the aluminum-based face paint, and he was removed from the show. Of course, we all know Buddy Epson went on to stardom with the Beverly Hillbillies, and there was a detective show that he starred in, something like that too. But that's it. That is it. Buddy Epson was replaced because of an allergic reaction to paint. And The Wizard of Oz went on to become one of Hollywood's greatest films of all time. And really, everybody loves it. But Buddy Epson, came to fame in his own right. There you have it, folks. Last but not least, now that we're done with the trivia for the day, anything involving the construction that's going on that the two of you can give us a behind-the-scenes comment about. How is all this affecting up in the healthcare center, all that construction?
Yesterday was a wild day with the generator switching over and the tornado warnings and, yeah.
What did you do with the tornado warning? There's really nothing you can do, right?
When it comes to a warning, you come into the hallway. You can't be next to the windows. And
Okay,
still close the shades.
okay. So there were things that we did, and it was in the midst of the power shutdown, which was not really a power outage. We were updating our electrical service, and we had to shut off for a while we rewired a section of the control panel. And so there it is. So I imagine you're looking forward to construction being done in Bradford. Hopefully by like December 1st. You guys should be done, right?
I hope so.
And then you'll be just about done with the first semester too.
Yes.
And when do you start your master's program now?
That would probably be next fall.
Next fall. So you'll probably be applying for another scholarship, right?
I would imagine so.
There you have it. All right, folks, that's our show for the day. I'd really like to thank my guest host today. I'd also like to thank Arlene for stopping down today. And I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in. There's also some behind-the-scenes people that I'm very grateful to. Tyler Gudek, Stacy Abbott, and of course my editor, Scott McFerrin. Anything that you might like about this show probably has his fingerprints all over it. But now that we're getting ready to sign off, do any of you know of a very, very famous Hollywood actress by the name of Betty White?
Yeah.
Betty White passed away earlier this year in January, 2 weeks shy of her 100th birthday. Here at East Castle, that would have made her a kid. We have several people over 100 here right now. But in her later years, by the way, I will say, if you've ever seen the movie The Proposal, horrible movie, but Betty White steals the show. Watch the movie just for Betty White. She's fabulous in it, just fabulous in it, especially if you're a Betty White fan. Betty White became very famous in her later years for giving out words of wit and wisdom to her friends. And one of them was, of course, and my favorite, she highly recommended that you always get 8 hours of beauty sleep every night. Unless, of course, you were ugly. In that case, she recommended you get 9. There you have it, folks. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.